So today, when I was looking at week 13 and I reflected upon the color code content for asynchronous versus synchronous, and then we're going to move on this week to start talking about promises. So basically, we're taking the concepts and we're just using more or updated ways to implement async code, ending next week with async await, which is the latest version. And there are benefits to all of these. And often it's not just one, it's a combination of a promise with an async await. And then it got me thinking about the piece of this async content that I felt was missing. I remember this last, because I actually, in one of the discussion posts I looked at from last year, I did talk about the event loop. So today, of course, as we move into week 13 with our next iteration of learning about how to implement async code, I went and searched for some. And guess what I found, which I was way excited about, is that color code actually did a JavaScript event loop, a updated content 7 months ago. And so what I realized is by watching the first part of this is basically what you got when for last week. And what I love about what he's doing here is that he's actually now integrating the idea of the event loop into this to help understand, hopefully to help us extend our understanding of how this works when we're in real life coding asynchronous content. So then I thought about how can we take this content and actually try to make it a little more real, because these things are wonderful and I think his examples are so good because they're pretty easy to reason about. So here's what I've come up with is that you're going to watch the updated content. And I've given you a link here to where I showed in here, but I will tell you it doesn't hurt. And I watched it on 2x just to get through, and I'm like, yep, ticked all the boxes. And then when we got about here, he starts bringing in the web APIs, and then talks about the event loop. And I love this, and the stack queue. And it just is really good because the more you understand how JavaScript handles real world code, because what we've been writing is great and is wonderful, and I think as applicable as it is in the real world JavaScript, we're generally writing some kind of asynchronous code because we're waiting for something to happen and we want the user not to wait. And the more efficiently we write that is of course vitally important, but also how we understand how the whole ecosystem works, because JavaScript interacts with the browser that interacts with web servers, blah blah blah. So here's what we're going to do. So first, watch till this point. Now you can keep going. I'm actually going to do this later because I like his content and it always helps me learn something new. So in your reply, in your own words, describe the event loop, what the event loop does, and why it's important. Right? Do this authentically, right? So, because this is the idea. When I read something, I can generally tell if a student wrote it. Now, it's not to say using chat once you draft your own understanding is bad, because it then helps you communicate that. But having it do it for you, not good, right? And I can generally tell the difference. So, don't do it. And then, do that. And also in your reply. So 1 and 2 are in your reply. Give a real world analogy, because I think these real world analogy of the event loops, that makes sense to you. You can come up with these. You actually don't have to write any code here. Although it would be fun, because what we've seen him do is use these examples today. Get coffee, sing a song, right? Where he gives multiple calls and explains, demonstrates the idea of asynchronous and synchronous. Okay, so do that. And then in your reply, so this is worth 80 points. And then in your reply, explain or revise their analogy, right? So whatever a student posts, and, expand, revise it. But I want you to, in terms of the call stack, the callback loop, and the event loop. Okay? Because now should have, and because we already have talked about the call loop, now you're putting in the event loop, which helps us understand the call stack. You can also do the task queue here, right? So I just want you to reply in that way because basically, anytime you can take a concept and put it in your own like understanding, right? Because first you have to understand what the other student wrote and then put it in terms of the technology and the words and the technical terms that we're going over. Okay, so that's how I will grade this week. Okay, so just looking at this week real quick, right? So you're going to have promises. Now, here I do actually have you take some notes, and I do, unlike last week, and this is one of those that's going to be prime for refactoring on my summer process. So anyway, you got that content here. And then we're going to take along the paths of what we did where I had you do the async workout, right? Now we'll refactor that using promises. So it's not that you necessarily have to add any functionality. You're just then refactoring it because this is the idea of that asynchronous code is written with several different implementations that you can do of that code. And then, of course, step 5. So step 5 in our decision-making process, right? So this one, you have to implement a module for render. Oh, actually, there's a video for this. I don't have to talk about it. So it is there. Make sure. And by the way, this one thing I would say about our decision stuff is if I ask you something specific to do and I see it's not done on the next step, I won't grade that until I get that from you. So just make sure you're reviewing and responding to any questions, or if I say you got to fix this before the next one, make sure you do that. And your functions need to be concise, right? They shouldn't do more than one or two things, really, right? And then, so anyway, that's what you have on deck this week. This is the week, right, 13 before we go out to spring break, but I'm not done with content. I'm going to work on 14, which I hope to work actually on more beyond that, depending on what I can get done. So have a great one. And over spring break, I said this I talked about this a little bit last week. I will be doing some work, but in general, I'm on break as well. I will reply as my time and connectivity allow. But no, this is also a great time, which is always to ask if you're stuck on something, help from Discord. All right, have a great spring break, and I'll talk to you soon.